Recently, some officers of the Hot Springs Police Department were recognized for life-saving efforts. And with me today is Corporal Joey Williams of the Hot Springs Police Department Public Relations Division.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much. It's both exciting and wonderful to hear of these life-saving stories. Tell us a little bit about the officers that recently got recognized.
Recently had two officers, Officer Davis and Officer Riley, who were recognized for using their Narcan to revive a young lady at a local hotel who had been overcome with an opioid overdose. They responded, located 3 individuals who had been overdosed. 2 of them were able to be revived without Narcan. A third individual in the room, young lady, was beyond that, so they deployed their Narcan and were able to bring her out of that overdose situation, saved her life.
How exactly does Narcan work? I see you have some in your hand.
Right, so the Narcan we carry 2 doses per officer, and when an officer locates somebody who is possibly overdosed, or they suspect maybe overdosed, they deploy it through the nose. And the Narcan, basically, without being a doctor and explaining it, interrupts the molecules of the opiates that are attaching to the cells, and it blocks that, and it brings them out quite rapidly. It's almost instantaneous that it happens.
And officers are trained to use Narcan?
Yes, every officer attended a class when they got their Narcan given to them that showed them how to use it, the risk and things like that, and the follow-up to it is turning people on their side, make sure their airways open, things like that. And on top of that, every officer is also CPR certified, so if you use that, it doesn't seem to be bringing them out, we can employ CPR also. 2
very important life-saving techniques these days.
Absolutely.
Why is the use of Narcan increasing?
Unfortunately, we're seeing opiate overdoses increasing across the country. It's not just a local problem, but it's a nationwide problem. And as we see those increases, officers are going to have to use Narcan. There's also other drugs that are coming into play, fentanyl, carfentanil, which are a microscopic amount of those drugs touched to your skin can actually be absorbed and put you in an overdose. And officers are coming in contact, canines are coming in contact with it. So not only is this for a tool that we have to save the public, it's also for ourselves in case we come into contact with something like that.
With those very potent drugs knocking out a person, perhaps they're with a loved one and don't even realize that they are in a life and death situation. Sometimes people are afraid to contact the police about that. Isn't that true?
Right, because an illicit drug may be being used, people may be apprehensive about contacting law enforcement or medical personnel for fear they may be arrested or charged with something. Actually, Arkansas law says that you cannot be charged or arrested for a drug like that if it's an overdose situation. So we don't want people to wait to call first aid or first responders. If somebody you think is an overdose situation, we're not coming here to arrest them. We're not coming there to charge them with anything. We want to get them the aid they need because time is valuable at this point, and every second lost is a chance we might not be able to bring them out of that overdose. So we want people to call us. This is why we have these tools to be able to use them.
Yes, it's time to save a life. Everything else is secondary.
Exactly.
Okay, very good. So how many lives have been saved so far by police officers using Narcan in this department?
We've had Narcan for a little over a year now, and we've had 6 saves so far.
That's amazing. Okay, let's go on to some other first aid techniques that all of your officers are trained to administer.
Right, so every officer is issued Narcan, but they are also issued a tourniquet. Every officer carries a tourniquet on their belt for use. Myths before with tourniquets, people didn't want to put them on because they're going to lose a limb, but with advanced medical technology and hospitals being so close, that's not a risk. We've had numerous saves with tourniquets, and those are not only for officers, but for every civilians, and every save we've had so far has been a civilian.
And how amazing that you have it on your person, so you could administer the tourniquet on the spot. And I assume this has a lot to do with gunshot injuries.
Some of them are gunshot injuries, but actually one of our more prominent saves, we had a elderly woman who was getting out of her car, didn't have it in gear. The car actually backed over her, and the door actually cut her. And cut her artery, and Officer Lowry responded and put a tourniquet on her, and without a doubt, the ER staff said that saved her life. She would have bled out. So not always gunshot, not always a violent crime situation. It just depends.
So again, it may not be what you think. Police officers are in the most unusual circumstances, and they have to react as quickly as possible.
And that's why these tools are important, because a lot of times we are the first officers or first people on the scene, so we can render that aid quickly until LifeNet and fire department respond.
And that also means that you're changing strategy is, I mean, your training strategy rather, is always changing because you've got to train for new circumstances and the changing culture on the street, what might be happening as far as the increased drug use, et cetera.
Absolutely, and every officer every year through our training goes through a first aid buddy aid class that helps us keep up to date on first aid and things we need to do, and just reminds us and lets us rehearse those skills.
And the buddy aid part is if you have to actually administer first aid to a fellow police officer?
To another officer or to yourself.
I see.
A lot of those tourniquets can be put on by themselves. We learned to put them on ourselves using one hand or whatever else, so if we're injured.
It's just amazing. Thank goodness that we have these tools and they're at the ready for all of our police force that are highly trained in those areas. Well, thank you for bringing to our awareness the police officers that are out in life-saving mode every day, the ones that have been recently recognized, those that have been saving lives through Narcan as well as CPR. It's a changing world out there and you continue to adapt to it.
Absolutely it is, and it's our honor, it's our calling to do those things.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us today. And next week we'll bring you more City News.